Hello YouTube, this is Hollera coming at you with the second video of the Paragon series. This is a warning to more experienced players. This will be a lot basic. So if you want to brush up on the basics, stick around, and if you like what you see, maybe subscribe. So here we go. Alright, as I said before, we're going to start our way from the bottom and work our way up. So first off, what are we playing? We're playing a MOBA, also known as a real-time action strategy game. The genre of strategy video games that are originated as a sub-genre of RTSs. The objective is to destroy the opposing team's main structure with the assistance of periodically spawned computer-controlled units, that is minions in Paragon. So let's take a minute to digest that. That would imply that you don't need a single enemy kill besides minions to actually win the game. So let's keep that in mind moving forward. So what do? We are heroes, and we generally help push the minion waves to the towers, destroy another tower, and then we destroy an inhibitor, which eventually will lead to the defeat of the enemy team, hopefully. Now, let me get a little bit more into the heroes. I'm going to start out with the kind of the basics, as I've been trying to do here. So first we got range. They're pretty straightforward. They hit hard and from a distance. They usually have very low HP. Melee, pretty straightforward. They hit with melee. They generally have more health than the ranged, but have to get in closer. They don't have as much health as tanks, however. Do not mistake a melee character for a tank character. That will be a very big mistake you make. Now onto tanks. As they sound, a lot of health, a lot of armor, steady but low damage. These are generally melee characters, but they are not limited to melee characters. Now onto support. These are the toughest classes to play well. Most of the characters have abilities that aid the team somehow, generally in kills or trying to keep them alive. So for instance, Decker has her stun ball, Narbash has his heal, Muriel has her shields. These are good examples of supports. Now, I'm going to try my best to get into the various roles here. So first off, we have the carry, probably one of the more easier characters to play. What a carry does is they generally have a very high basic attack, or just high damage in general. Mostly basic. So these will be characters like Yin, Twin Blast, Revenant, and let's see, Murdoch, Grim. These are all the ranged ones. Seraph. These are these guys, what they do, you want to feed them. You want to give them as much experience as possible, as many kills as possible, so that later on they will hopefully dish out all the majority of the damage on your team, netting even more kills for your team. So what they do is they generally go into what's called the safe lane, or for simplicity's sake, let's say the right lane. What they do here is they will generally go until they take a tower, and then probably assist throughout the map while watching their own lane. The most important aspect of a carry is to not let your lane get too far pushed back, because remember, you do have to travel back there in time. Alright, now let's start up with the support, seeing how it is the same exact lane. The support also goes into the right lane, or the safe lane. And what a support does is they will support. They will help the carry get kills. They will let them get the last hits. They will let them, yeah, they'll keep them alive. They'll you know, protect your carry. That's their job. They may, in the event that it's a kind of a stalemate, they may drift out of the lane a little bit to go help other lanes. But generally, you want to stay with your carry when you're a support, or at least be in a team fight, something of that sort. You don't want to be useless at any one time as a support. So, let's move it up. So, we now have the mid laner. Pretty straightforward, they go to the mid lane. these are generally casters. What a caster is they are characters who use abilities to gain their damage. They don't really have that great of basic, but they can do a lot with their abilities. A good example of this is Morgesh, Bellica, Gideon, the like. Gadget, yeah, like I said, the like. So these characters, like, they have to be on their toes, because mid lane is a very short lane. It is actually the shortest of all three of the lanes. So you have to keep in mind, you know, how fast those minions are going to push up, and generally just how the awareness of the map, because it is so easy to get ganked in mid lane. I can't tell you how many times I pushed up to their tower a little bit too early, and then a Chimera came out of the jungle and slapped some freaking sense into me. So be aware of you have to be wary in mid lane, you have to be decent in mid lane, and you have to generally be fast at clearing those minion waves, because if those minion waves push up on you way too fast, you're gonna have a really bad time. That's why casters flourish in the mid lane. Now onto the off lane. These are generally durable characters, or oh, I forgot to mention that the off lane is the left lane, for, you know, to put it in dummy terms. So what an offlaner is, they're generally either durable or quick. And what I mean by quick, I mean a character maybe like Aurora who has 2 escapes. They don't necessarily have to move fast, but they just have to get out fast if they have to move in an attack for whatever reason to poke the enemy carry out of the enemy lane. These can also be tanky characters, but they have to have a decent amount of damage. So probably somewhere like a Bruiser, which is like a part, like a melee character that's not quite tank, but not good enough to be not a tank. So what they do is they will try to harass the enemy carry, and what they do is by doing this, you have to poke them every now and again with generally like abilities, or, you know, just hit them with a basic every now and again, and slowly whittle them down to the point where they'll have to leave their lane. For beginners, I highly recommend that you don't really try to play defensively more than offensively. Once you get a little bit more experienced and know how this lane is going to function, then maybe you can start pushing a little bit more offensively. For characters like Aurora, you generally don't want to move out of the tower too far without your ultimate, otherwise, you know, you'll kind of die. So now that we've got mid lane, safe lane, off lane, we're going to move on to the jungle, which should be pretty self-explanatory. It is the giant forested areas on the map. That is the jungle. You have the right jungle and the left jungle. The enemy also has the same. The right jungle on your side will always have more minions, as well as you have what's called an amber link in the jungle. And what will happen is every time you kill a minion in your jungle, it will fill this amber link. And periodically, I'll have to look up the time again. I'll probably put it in the description below, or comment if you want it. The amber link will periodically give experience to the entire team. So what this means is, even if you don't want a jungler, you should probably have one, because it is so important. I can't tell you how many times I went in a game there was no jungler, and you notice the difference between having a jungler and having that amber link, and not having a jungler and having that amber link. So keep that in mind when you are, you know, deciding teams. So one thing I want to point out is each lane has its own buff, with the exception of the off lane. The mid laner has the river buffs, which are these 2 flies near the center. The jungler has their green buff, The offlaner has the gold buff, which is meant to maximize XP. So let me go and explain each of these. The gold buff is the offlane's essentially it's like an EXP boost. On every last hit you'll gain extra CXP. So then we are going to move on to the mid lane. So what these did, there was a recent change actually to this. So what these do now is every 3 minutes, I believe, every 3 minutes they will spawn on the left and the right. They will spawn 2 river buffs. Some people call these flies, but you know, whatever. You can call them whatever you want as long as your team understands what the heck you're talking about. It's really hard to explain what these do because river buffs have so many different buffs. There is the shadow buff, there is the DOT buff, which is damage over time for those who don't know. There is the red buff, which is ability damage, blue for movement speed. If I'm missing any, I apologize, but you get the gist of it. There's a lot of buffs there. So controlling these is a pretty good thing to do. But you gotta remember every time you walk out and push up to that point, make sure you have your lanes pushed in mid lane so you know it's safe. Also, you know, watch out for the jungler because they might come up and, you know, off you while you're trying to get that river buff, so be careful. Now let's go on to the jungle buff. The jungle buff is or also known as green buff. It will temporarily give you a shield, and then after the shield depletes, it will explode. Yeah. So it's a pretty nice buff. Too many times have I seen junglers just let this go to waste and not get it at all, and then the enemy team gets it, and then they have 2 freaking green buffs. So yeah, just, you know, keep an eye on that. So I think here we'll go into a few terms that maybe beginners might not understand if you're new to a MOBA or new to Paragon or whatever, you know. So I guess the first off is a team fight. A team fight is when your entire team or a team of 3 is a team of like 2 or 3 is battling a large amount of the enemy team. As the game later progresses, the more important and frequent team fights will become, at least if you're playing against a good team. You need to keep an eye out on the minimap to anticipate team fights and get there in time to avoid that 2v3 or 2v4 engagement, because let's face it, we've all been there. That sucks. So another one is an initiator, and here's one I see a lot of new people struggle with, and it gets so frustrating when people don't know what an initiator is. So I want that to be known here, what an initiator is. An initiator is generally somebody who's more durable, like a tank or a bruiser, or somebody with more health than the general population of the team. And what the initiator does is they are the ones who start the fights. They're the ones that go in first. And the reason they do this is because the first person to attack a person is generally who they'll fight. So you want them to attack that tank. You want them to attack that guy who's gonna sit there a while. You don't want them to attack your carry, who's gonna probably drop in like 3 hits from another carry. You know what I'm saying? So you don't really want that scenario to occur. So make sure your initiator if you're an initiator, make sure you're initiating those fights. Make sure you know when to initiate those fights. If the enemy lane is too far pushed up on the left and right and you're all in middle, and if you see one guy there and you see nobody else on the map, they're probably around in the jungle. So you don't want to initiate that 2v1 and then turn into a 2v4. So just be, like I said, keep map awareness is key here. Wards are key here. Everybody should have a ward with the exception of maybe the carry. Just because you want them to maximize on that damage. And if you play a carry and you solo queue, make sure you have a ward, because you cannot trust everybody to have a ward and play this game properly, as we all know. So, let's see, what's next up? Feeding. So, feeding means putting yourself repetitively in a vulnerable position, resulting in your death at the hands of an enemy hero. This is called feeding simply because you are personally supplying the enemy with the gold they need to build powerful items. Yeah, for obvious reasons that's bad. You know, you don't want to really be supplying your enemy team. If you find that you're dying a lot and you don't know why, it's probably because you're overextending. Now, what's an overextension, Holera? Well, an overextension is when you are pushed up way too far past what is deemed safe. Now, how do I know what is safe? How do I know what is pushed up too far? Well, essentially, you want all your lanes to be pushed at generally an even rate. If you're in middle, or if you're on right, or if you're on left, and you have your lane pushed up, but you see everybody else's is pushed back, odds are, if you push up, you're gonna get ganked. Just for the simple fact that you don't have map control at that point. And you should probably, at this time, swap lanes and help out another teammate who's obviously having trouble. Now, generally, you got to be careful with this, because remember, every time you leave your lane, you want it to be pushed up or you want it to be safe, right? So what these mean is, what pushed up means is you want it to be far enough to the point where you can go, leave your lane, do something, and come back, and it won't be at your tower getting attacked by the time you come back. Another
safe in the event that you can't push it up means maybe there's not an enemy hero there, maybe, you know, you've weakened the enemy minion wave and you just got a fresh one, you know, stuff like that. Safe. I'm sure you can hopefully grasp the concept here. You probably hear another term people will probably say is CC. CC is known as crowd control, and it's referring to items or abilities that temporarily prevent ability use. That means things like stunts, or so for instance that will be Rampage's Rock, Narbash's Thug, Decker's Stasis Bomb. At least I think it's called Stasis Bomb. It might also refer to things. Some people refer to things that slow, or, you know, stuff like that. Stuff that knock up is another good one for Steel. Steel knocks up. Narbash knocks up. Narbash slows. Narbash does a lot. He's a good support. So what about experience? How do you get experience in this game? Well, there are two forms of experience. There is your hero experience, and there is your gold. Or in this particular game, it is card points. So what is the difference? Well, your hero experience will level up your hero. Your hero will gain stats as you level up. It will gain abilities as they level up, and stuff like that. So the middle, off, and safe lane are lanes that generally give experience. They will also give card points, but they will give more experience than card points. So keep that in mind. Now, another thing to keep in mind is the person who gets the last hit will gain all the card points for that kill, minion or hero, and they will gain a majority of the experience. I may be wrong on the card points bit. I think it might be they gain the majority of the card points. I don't know if they gain it all. I will have to go and look at that again. I forgot to put that in the notes. So on to card points. What are card points? Well, as you know, you have that lovely thing called a deck that you built before the game. Or if you don't have one, you're playing the default deck. Either one, you know. So each card, if you notice, has a number with upgrades in them. These numbers and upgrades will
will be you can equip said cards and upgrades via card points. So generally you'll need both card points and experience to get the build you want, or to get further in the game period if you just run in that default deck. So what gives these card points? Well, as I stated before with the jungler, there is something called the Amber Link, which you'll gain card points for your team over time. Another way to gain card points is via the jungle minions. They will generally give more CXP than actual EXP. So that means the person who is jungling a lot will probably generally have more card points, but they may or may not have a lower level. And that's probably why people, I noticed when I was starting out, I was like, how the heck is this guy getting such a high level? How is this guy getting such a high CXP? And that is why, is because they're probably jungling, or they're probably laning alone, or, whatever. Alright, YouTube, this has been Holera with the basics of Paragon and MOBAs. If I missed anything, let me know in the comments. I'll try to get it in one of the future vids. If you have any questions, or I didn't quite explain something well enough, you can comment that as well. I'll try to reply to any of the more pressing questions. Thank you, have a wonderful time, and I will see you guys on Paragon.